Inevitably before a talk, whether here or in Rochester, outside of retreat, I spend some time wondering what I'm going to talk about. And so I did this morning, and 2 or 3 topics did come up in the mind. But then during this last round of sitting, I wondered, why am I giving these talks? And the reason this came up is that this comes up quite often, has come up ever since I've left a formal Zen center. Somebody asking me, why do you give the talks? Why do you give the meetings? Couldn't someone else hold the talks? Why don't I? Could there be some other speakers coming in, other teachers? And last Sunday during a trustees meeting, in which I brought up the question of what would happen with the center after I've died or if I become incapacitated, this has stirred up this question again in discussions around the kitchen table, for some of which I was present, for some of which not. Not just what will happen to the center after Toni's gone, but why is she the one who gives the talks, or all the talks? And I'm wondering about this myself right now. Not that I think of alternatives, but why do I give a talk? In retreat it's different, because there are people here with active questions, problems that we share and look at together in a very intimate, intense, quiet setting. There's rarely anymore any question of what I'm going to bring up in a talk. It's given, it comes up. But driving into Rochester of a Monday afternoon or evening, what am I going to talk to people about? What do they want to hear? Or do they want to hear something? Do they want something to be discussed? Because you say people wouldn't come there, but what is one coming for? What am I going there for? What am I here for? Because I find it much easier to talk with people one-on-one or in a small group discussion than to prepare, although I don't prepare for a talk, but there is this thing, what am I going to talk about? It exerts a certain tension and pressure within, as long as I think about it and don't come up with something. It's arduous to give a talk. Much easier to just sit and bask in the sunshine, the light, watching the little dewdrops on the grass and the mist, the different hues in the hills. So why do I give a talk? Am I doing it to promote Toni Packer or the Toni Packer way? One has to look at that for oneself. But there is no resonance to this question within. I don't feel that way. Somebody could say, well, maybe you're denying it. I have to watch it. But I wouldn't even be able to say what the Toni Packer way is, as one of the many different ways of doing what. A talk is held, is given, because it seems to me very clear that we need to understand ourselves. Not in any particular way, but understand ourselves from moment to moment. There is no particular way about it. There's only understanding, insight, seeing, listening to what is happening. And if that is not happening, we deceive ourselves. We get trapped in our conditioned ways of, and we could list all day and night what our conditioned ways are, wanting to be something, wanting to make something out of this or that, ourselves or the other. I won't go into the list of things. We can do that some other time or in discussions. But it's crystal clear to me that unless there's understanding from moment to moment of what goes on in this mind and body, not just personally, but universally, there is self-deception going on, unless there's insight into that. And that's what a talk is about, what goes on in the mind, functioning, as it were, as a mirror, to see this mind, to have insight into it. In a very bare bones way, not in any special particular way. Maybe people see a way in this as compared to this way or that way, but I don't see it. If something is seen and the words come to express it, then the words will express it. And keeping in mind that the words that express what is going on in this mind and body are not what is actually going on. A mirror doesn't have a way, does it? It just reflects what is going on. And whether this is a truthful reflection, one has to be very careful, and there's always the invitation for people to bring up what doesn't make sense, seems false or is false, should be gone over again or stated differently. This is all very welcome stuff to examine together. Not leave it all to this one person. But maybe this isn't what is happening in a talk. Maybe I'm deceiving myself. Because what I hear from people mostly is I can't make a general statement. But often when talks are discussed, it's not so much what is happening in a talk in a person who is listening, but rather this other question which I brought up earlier. If talks are at all discussed, I'm not saying that this looking isn't going on in people. But it's rarely brought up when the question comes up, why are you giving talks? How we listen to it, what these talks are, other than Toni holding them in a certain place in this room with a microphone, exclusively. So, maybe I haven't said enough, but I would like to hear from whoever is here and wishes to talk about it, whether maybe it would be better to have discussions or other people giving talks. Am I preventing someone from giving a talk? Of course, we've discussed that at times, that there are multitudes of talks going on, and everyone is free. No one is bonded to this place to have to just listen to talks here. Everyone is free to go to these many, many offerings that are there. So what about it? I'm really interested to take this up, that we take this up with each other. this whole business of talks here.
I think for myself, you suggested that it's never brought up about what a talk is, about this, for lack of a better word, process of listening. Maybe it's precisely for that reason that I prefer discussions, because if I'm not clear or something, I can say, what do you mean? Which we don't do in talks.
Yeah.
Also, there may be, at different times, ways that you express something which triggers a response in me, which then seems to get in the way of this process of listening. What does she mean? Why has she said that? I don't see that at all. And in a discussion, again, that can be clarified. Whereas in a talk, I'm left to either stew in that and struggle with it, and therefore no longer be with what is going on, or drop it, which sometimes is much harder to do. There seems to be these reflexes in us which want to mull over and over these processes that go on.
So what you're saying is, or are you saying that a talk, yes, but the possibility for me to say, wait a minute, could you say that again? Or I don't see it this way. Or is that so? To have that possibility, but have a talk going on? You said in discussions. See, discussions are not where I would be talking about something. Right. It's what somebody brings up, and I do enter into it, but it's not that I would talk about the rich and the poor or some such topic.
I'm not sure. I wasn't concretely suggesting
yes.
anything. I was sort of exploring what my relationship to these things are, to a discussion, to a talk.
Yeah.
And
how would people feel about this if in a talk, whoever feels there's unclarity, there are, not understanding, and also the desire to say something. I don't necessarily mean one has to do this, but if one feels, I want to discuss this with her, I want to find out more about it, then to say that in a talk?
Well, what's happening now?
No. Or is that happening now, that you would like to know more what I'm saying, that you didn't understand something?
No, but possibly a process where, I don't know, combination. In a discussion period, other people bring up topics, but the only difference of what we're talking about here would be that you bring up the topic, and maybe talk about it, and other people, if they have some question about that in themselves, would be free to bring that in.
Bring what in? I don't quite get
the question that they have about what you're saying.
What I'm saying, yeah.
That in themselves.
And then say at this, wait a minute, what did you just say? I'd like to hear that again, or make that clearer. Is that what you're saying?
Well,
I have a question about it.
Not necessarily that, just a question to clarify, but I thought maybe what Peter was saying, that a person could say, I don't see it that way, or that brings out something that I see in myself that I would say, I'd like to say this about her.
I want to make a comment.
Yes.
Yeah, this has brought up something. I mean, I would like to say something about what you just said. To have that possibility in a talk. Yeah, well, you're just throwing it out as a possibility.
I would find that very irritating and kind of confusing. I think, for me, there is a value in talks, and there's also a value in discussions. And I could also see something like having a talk followed by a discussion. but to mix them and have a talk with the option of anybody interrupting at any point for clarification or personal comment, or let's don't call it personal, but comment, feels to me like it would create something very muddy and with your role or okay, function, however you want to put it, being very unclear, and I think it would kind of jar the process of both the talk and the discussion.
Well, how about at Omega? That was sort of a question, not a discussion period, but questions put to you. That seemed to work really well.
Yeah, and we've tried it a few times, and then very often people don't have questions. But I've over the years invited people to put questions in the donations box or so. But the first time, or maybe a couple times, it worked. But
somehow people talking at the time with their questions was a little more dynamic than just having questions.
Yeah, but we've just been through a 2-day sitting too.
Right.
Which is a more dynamic thing than coming here. But do people have questions? Do they come? Do you come with questions that you would like to? Because it's another possible. We mentioned it last week in Rochester. Bring me questions, write questions. Because I don't pick the questions that I choose for a talk out of the air either. It's what's been coming up in people, but maybe not in the people who are just at the talk, happen to be at the talk. And to have a direct input of what someone would like to look at or have aired, it would be very helpful.
To go back to what Joan said about unclarity or muddiness, or what I often find in talks, what I mostly am concerned with is verifying the truth of what you're saying. And often I can't do that, either because you're going so fast that either that, or there's just a lot of unclarity in me, or muddiness, or confusion, or what have you. So that what you're saying often appears to be words, ideals, or something apart from what I need to work on at that moment, or what comes up in listening to you, or the need to see the truth of what you're saying. I often feel that it would be great if you would say something and then I wouldn't know what that meant, and I would have to discover or find out the truth of that. I often feel that it's you who's doing that work. I'm not doing the work, I'm listening.
But what kind of listening is that, in which no work is done? Can there be work done while listening?
There is, and there can be, but often there is this confusion, or not clarity, and it often seems like that is what needs to be worked on and with. And that's why it's so much better working one-on-one, because we can work right with what comes up and what is there at that moment. It seems like that has to be so that I see what Joan is saying, that it might be quite disruptive to have that in a talk. On the other hand, I certainly don't see you as the source of clarity. I mean, that doesn't work. I mean, if there's clarity in oneself, well, you don't give that to us. I mean, it doesn't come from you.
But is this...
And if there's muddiness, there's confusion, or if there's not the ability to see the truth of what you're saying, then let's work with that, and let's stay with that, and let's stay with why that can't be seen. What do you mean? I don't understand. I don't see the truth of that, or why don't I see the truth of that, or you see what I mean? And then stay right with that instead of going on to following your mind, your exploration. I don't know how that could be done within the group of people, but this is how I often experience it.
I myself like talks very much. It feels like without everybody talking and asking questions and interrupting, that I can go into a topic that I may not even have been aware was a question for me in a much deeper way than maybe even I could in a discussion period. And I find maybe we don't need to have them as often, but I would very much miss them. And I agree with Joan that I really wouldn't like them interrupted. But there are things that come out in talks, out of retreat as well as in, that just have been sort of in the back of my mind somewhere, and I've never really given them the space that they need. And somehow the talk, the vehicle of the quietness of the talk, allows me to kind of focus and go much more deeply than I otherwise would. And that's been very helpful to me. So I would hope they would continue on an occasional basis the way they are.
We have sort of occasionalized them by having one in Rochester in an on period and one, is that correct? One in Rochester and one in Springwater? And are you thinking in terms of maybe twice a year? Or?
Well, no, I would even like them more than that.
Oh, well, that's it.
I know it's how often are they now?
One in Springwater and
Just
one in
twice a
Rochester,
year.
and then we switch and have a discussion period here and a discussion period in Rochester. So there are 4 occasions in which we get together in 3 weeks, over a period of 3 weeks, and of course right after retreat I usually don't do a talk or discussion in Rochester. Monday night I take off.
I very much like when you read things, not just you're speaking extemporaneously, but also sometimes the readings, Krishnamurti or whatever, have been, even though I may read that same thing at home, somehow the combination of sitting and the quietness of this allows me to hear it in a different way. So I don't feel like it necessarily has to be all of your stuff.
I just wanted to mention in terms of talks, people, I think everybody knows that they can come to any one of the 7 talks of a retreat also, if they're able to, they'll come down. Just call ahead of time, so they're available also.
But they do have a very different quality from these talks, because they are so much what's happening in retreat, which, you can still enter into the spirit of it if you just come that one time. But it has a different quality.
What is the difference in quality? Something coming up in a retreat different from what comes up out of retreat? I'm interested.
Well, very often in retreat, you sometimes touch on 2 or 3 different questions that people have had, or maybe it is only one, and you go into that one very deeply. I don't know, I've been very touched. I remember when you read a year or so ago from the woman from Holland. What was her name?
Eddie.
Yeah, that sort of thing has really touched very deeply with me. And that's the sort of thing that hasn't been done in retreat, that type of thing.
On 7 days.
Yeah, and boy, I like that one a lot.
But different topics do come up. You talked about abortion, stuff that doesn't seem to come up in retreat, but sometimes different issues do come up.
I find the talks really helpful. I seem to prefer that to the discussion period because, again, like what Mary said, in sitting it seems like things kind of penetrate into this aha level, whereas when we are talking, it seems like it gets more and more intellectual, and we get more and more caught up in, well, is this true, is this not true? And thinking about it, whereas with the talk, even though some of it I might not focus in on or be clear about, then some of it just seems to penetrate right through, and it just does something different. So I'd like to see that continue. Somehow that seems so helpful. And whether that's done by you or someone else, I don't know.
About the readings, of course I could read Krishnamurti ad infinitum. There is a vast volume of teachings, but a book like Eddie Hillesum you don't come across very often. And I grab an opportunity like this, and something occurred to me this morning. I just read, last night I read about a woman and her ways of finding out about herself, and I thought this may be something to read this morning. But then all these other things came up, and so if anybody has something that they feel is good material, do send it or bring it. I'll look at it. I'm interested in that myself. But what I'm interested in is not some inspirational writings or something where you don't have the feeling the person is really looking and speaking out of that clarity or simplicity and emptiness of looking directly. If someone quotes or uses other people's teachings that I would not use.
You know, it's very hard for me to say this. I feel this holding back and mentioning this, but I really miss hearing the koans occasionally. They, for some reason, hearing you even occasionally, it's been so long, but boy, there was something about those that just made me work, and I very much miss them. Not that I'm unclear about being here or anything, and I understand your hesitation in opening that Pandora's box, but that's the kind of readings that, even though they made sort of history fall away, the context of when they were written and where didn't seem at all important. They just had such a depth to them.
What are you suggesting? I never just read a series of koans. I took one koan and then tried to see what does this have to do with our nitty-gritty daily life.
And that was wonderful. You know, I remember the one that has always been with me is Senjo Inner Soul. Just something about some of them that just just penetrated and made me work and had a great deal of relevance to my life. That I know the connections and the history, and I can understand in many ways why you haven't done those, but I could really get into that on an occasional surprise basis, not in a routine. Sort of Christmas in July.
I like them too, actually.
Toni, have you felt that some of the feedback has been suggesting that you shouldn't give talks?
No, I'm wondering why I am giving them. I'd like to share this wondering with in here. No, what I hear from feedbacks is that people sort of ultimately feel, well, it's your thing, what you do, but questioning it, but no, nobody has said you shouldn't give talks, or not even implied. I haven't heard that, but why do you do it, or why do you do it all the time, or why you? Or your way of doing it. Well, a few people have spoken to it. Did you hear them? Mary and Janet saying it's something on the back burner is being looked at in depth, and some understanding comes. Janet was saying that not in an intellectual way, not in a thinking way, but in a directness of comprehension.
I'm wondering if you stay with something that makes you feel uncomfortable it gets close to an hour or two, just working with something like that, maybe not enjoying the talk or liking it or singing along with it. When you can rebut something fairly quickly in a discussion, maybe it short circuits that being
discomfort.
Uncomfortable just seem like a grain of sand. I know there's all questions of that do come up, the speaker and the listener, and it can seem like a hierarchy and a lowerarchy. But, so maybe that kind of question, the whole form, but what is somebody talking, just talking, looking at something in depth, and if you're sitting there doing the same thing, and even, getting mad or getting confused and not being able to do anything about that, just sitting with, or working with that.
With the discomfort of it all, you say?
Yeah.
The confusion of it, the muddiness.
Not knowing what it'll bring about or whether it'll bring about anything.
There are insights that come from that, but often it's like it's Toni's insight. That's what I feel. And as such, it's words. As such, it's not. And if there ever is any insight, it never comes from Toni. Or I can't.
Well, that's what Toni says all the time. She points that out all the time.
I guess what I'm saying is that it's arduous work for the listener too, I guess. If there's that separation, then it is just words. If you're not working on the problem, actively.
Why do you come to talks? If you don't,
I come because it's true. There are things that come up that surprise me, that I would not have thought of, and that aren't on the back burner that way. And sometimes I come to be entertained.
And it doesn't happen, or? And then when it doesn't happen?
What?
And then when it doesn't happen, when
When what doesn't happen?
the entertainment.
That always happens. That always happens.
Oh?
What I would find very beneficial in the talks outside of retreat would be a period set aside after them, either in the sitting room or maybe out on the balcony or wherever, where people could ask questions about what you talked about, or maybe challenge things that you have said.
Yeah.
I think sometimes I have difficulty listening to a talk just because I know I don't have to remember anything about it. It's not something I have to work with, really. There's nothing demanded of me, but if we were going to have a period afterwards where we were going to sort of go over what was in the talk together, then I think that would, for me anyway, that would help me work with the talk a little more attentively.
If you knew afterwards, you sort of were expected to ask questions, or expect this of yourself, is that what you say? That you have to sort of remember what's going on. So I'm just trying to feel out what you say.
I think I could get into the talk more deeply if I knew at the end of it I could say, you know, what you said about such and such does not really ring true for me because of whatever, blah, blah, blah.
Yeah.
And then maybe go into that particular point a little more.
Yeah. How do people, it's come up a couple of times now, feel about that, having a shorter talk, and they have to really have watch out o'clock, and or just add 10, 15, 20 minutes to discuss how people feel about that.
I'd like to try it a few times.
Yeah.
Optional, right. I thought,
Like to just go walk and be quiet.
Yes, I thought that's what you were going to say, because somebody once asked me that, why couldn't we have 20 minutes of silence still sitting after a talk? It's the best time to really look at some of the stuff that's come up. Not after the talk, out and talking or eating or whatever, but have a period of sitting afterwards.
We have that in retreat.
Yes. Yeah. So, do people feel better about having the questions afterwards rather than interrupting the talk? I see a lot of nodding.
We're also talking about outside of retreat, I assume.
Yes, we're talking outside of retreat, yes. We're not changing the quietness of the retreat. Although that has come up with regard to the retreat, people have wondered, and I've wondered whether those people who want to discuss after a talk, whether we could find a place which we don't have right now where people could get together and discuss. I wouldn't necessarily participate in this, but there are people who have mentioned this. A lot have been stirred up, and they would like to have their say about things, or couldn't there be some place? Well, often when it has been brought up, it means right here, but I don't think we can do this in retreat. It would have to be that people who want to discuss would have to go someplace else. And I don't think we have this someplace else right now, do we? No. The lawn? Up in the...
Well, it could be tried. Personally, I never liked the idea of having discussions during retreats, and I still am very resistant to it, but I was talking to someone the other night who really liked the idea a lot, and so I just sort of started thinking about it, and recalled that I did once sit a session where the person had a discussion and instead of a talk on one of the days, and rather than have it be just some little thing hidden off in some room, I mean, it might be an interesting experiment. I mean, I don't know why I'm even suggesting it since I'm so resistant to it, but you know, to have it actually replace the talk on one of the days, to have a discussion, because as this person was saying, during a retreat, people get into a very quiet space of really listening, and you know, why assume that it would turn into something not quiet? It might be very fertile. I don't know. I mean, it is a thought, possibility.
But then you would, if we decided to do this, we would be imposing on maybe, if 40 people come to the retreat, maybe on 30 people we would be imposing something that they're not into.
Well, nobody has to be there. They could always be off in the woods if they'd rather. I'm not pushing it. I'm just saying, if it's going to be tried, I would rather see it be tried and really given some space than have it be tucked off in some room somewhere, hidden away.
Well, it's not the hidden away per se, but that people who come to retreat to spend 7 days in quietness have that quietness.
But the quietness is broken anyway by your talks and by the meetings. If by quietness we mean the complete absence of words. And by the way, I think it'd be interesting to try a retreat without any words. But I mean, it could be that a group discussion could occur in a very quiet way, and could be a very useful thing. And if anyone didn't want to be in it, they certainly wouldn't have to be.
And what if you had 40 people who didn't want to be into it and 5 who did? And what do you put these 5 people in this building during retreat that don't impact the 40? There's no place in the building you wouldn't hear them. You could hear them out here.
How about the exercise room? Although I don't like the idea.
You could hear the above the exercise room.
It would almost make more sense, if we were talking like logistics, to just have a 3-day retreat and do that. And that's your experiment rather than...
And that is announced to be in this way, a 3-day retreat in which there's a discussion every day.
Yeah. And people who want to come to that will come to that.
Yeah.
Then you don't have any conflict.
See, people have increasingly, it's been interesting, asked for longer retreats, which we haven't offered and are not about to offer yet, but it happens more and more that people say, I wish this retreat would last for 11 days or 2 weeks. Or
Would you have a 3-day retreat after the 7-day retreat?
no, have this retreat be scheduled from the very beginning to be a 10-day or 11 or 12 or 2-week retreat. But we haven't worked this out, and I couldn't function.
But Toni, supposing you didn't give talks or hold meetings every day.
But see, there are retreat centers who do that. See, we have such a tremendous spectrum, a whole rainbow of different retreats being offered, in which such things take place, where there are different teachers or no teachers.
We'll have to get other staff to continue it on. I don't know about anybody else, I'm usually good at it.
I don't mind it being longer. I usually feel like
Of course, we could play with it, that I give a talk every other day, and but We once, because of several people very intensely requesting this, did sort of an ingenious thing, which we thought was ingenious, didn't turn out this way. We had a 7-day retreat scheduled, and then 1 day for people to leave and come, and then another 4-day just back to back, so that somebody could have 12 days if they wanted to. And what happened? We only got applications for the 7-day and maybe 3 for the 4-day. There were maybe 2 or 3 people who would have stayed for the whole thing. Wasn't it something like that? We then canceled the 4-day. And it made us wonder, because other places schedule 2 weeks, 3 weeks, 3 months and get people for it. But that's the variety that already exists for people to go to. And in the very last retreat, where we had, for the first time ever, I think, that we had 7 meetings, a meeting every day with few people. There was something about that was very good.
I feel like, in a certain sense, the topic of the seemingly unending topic of a particular person meeting with people and talking in retreat, and not somebody else, hasn't, a certain aspect of it hasn't been really touched upon here. And maybe it's because it's an uncomfortable thing and it's unclear, especially in the context in which we work here, how to sort of touch upon that, but maybe also because there are unknowns in that, because one hasn't necessarily heard someone other than Toni attempt to give a talk, but on a personal basis, although I do talk, and we do talk here at the center on staff and with the people that come here, we do tend at times, anyway, in the kitchen or at other places, to question things together. I do find that I'm able to, or that in a context of, in a meeting, say with Toni, or in a talk of Toni's, there's a way of, I'm not saying this happens all the time, and I'm not saying that something isn't said that seems sort of off the wall or whatever, but that there's somehow a way to go into something in a kind of a depth and a kind of clear way of also going into it that, for me, I find very sort of tuned into, and sometimes some things, do sort of click, or just something is said, or whatever. And I know it's something that maybe there's hesitancy to sort of talk about or think about, because then it sort of has the potential of making somebody out to being special, or whatever the ways is that we've been used to sort of dealing with that sort of thing. But if something is also, at least up to this point, a factual thing in one's own experience, then there's some validity to that, at least for oneself. It may not be the same case like Richard was saying before, that for him a lot of the time things are maybe more confusing or muddy or whatever. So I guess I can only speak for myself. But it's just a point I thought to address. And again, it's an unknown in the sense that I haven't sat and listened to someone else in the context of people we know in that same kind of situation. So, but I don't think it's like out of nowhere that not saying that it wouldn't be interesting to maybe hear something else, maybe it would totally blow me away. Again, I'm just speaking from what I've experienced and know, and I'm totally open to that experience. It's limited, and be interested to have that question.
Have what question?
My experience, in that sense. In other words, if somebody else were to talk, and that there might be a possibility that same kind of working and way of going into something would happen in a different context. Actually, when we did go to see Krishnamurti a couple of years ago, well, you see, he starts at a very more general kind of level in the talk than we usually do here. So it takes a while to sort of get more focused into something, but there's sort of a quality. Yeah, I guess just looking at it now as I talk, a lot has to do with, or maybe all has to do with how one is listening to whoever is saying what. I mean, if there's a quality of listening here, it may not matter so much, because one can discern what is so and what is not so.
What's the process you go through in giving a talk? In giving the talk, you're working with something in yourself, and is that something only you can do, of the people who are here, say, or would other people be able to go through a similar process that would then result in other people being able to give a talk, or is it only possible for you?
Why don't you experiment with it? I'm away half of the time.
Well, I'm not challenging at all. I'm just
No, I'm not. I mean it.
Yeah.
I've been saying this for years. Are you discussing or discuss things with each other, talk with each other?
Well, I think people discuss things all the time, but I think that's different from giving a talk.
Oh, then try that.
What is, I don't know. Yeah, I don't want to do it.
See the process. Peter?
I've sort of heard throughout this, to some degree or another, the sort of, the difference between, say, discussion and talk. And to some degree, it seems to me that's in us. I mean, for whatever reason, the context of a discussion, I find, to use the word, more helpful than the context of a talk. That's just because of what goes on for me. And the key seems to be this thing of listening. That something about the dynamics of a discussion, of entering into it, of sort of putting oneself out there, taking, if you like, taking that risk of just going out there, that is very uncomfortable making sometimes. As Wayne suggested in a talk, that one has to be with that uncomfort. The rich thing is the listening. That's when things really begin to happen and open up. Is when there really is a total experience of listening without anyone doing that listening and interpreting. So what is the difference between talking? If right now I'm talking to you people, maybe it's only for like 3 minutes as opposed to Toni for 40 minutes. But if I'm really listening to what I'm saying and really concerned about that and exploring that, that a kind of work that's going on that we can all enter into together? It may not be the same context of a talk, and it may not have, for different people, the same, I was going to say results, but that's not it.
Isn't it?
Well, it doesn't seem to be for me. I mean, I don't want to get into the linguistics of cause and effect and the result coming out of that process, but
That wasn't simple what you said. It was very complicated.
Sorry. I just have trouble with the word result. Let's say that, because it has connotations for me of something bringing it out. Like the attainment thing, or the cause and effect relationship. That's why I'm sure of that word, of its usage at that point, because the change takes place in the talk. I've heard people say change can take place for them in the talk. That, as Toni said, things on the back burner can be come upon, and we can work at that stuff in a deeper way in the silence. It seems enormously helpful, and lights can go on in that process. And all I'm saying is that can't that happen in other ways too? I mean, I've seen it in my own life. Lights go on in incredible circumstances that had nothing to do with talks and nothing to do with Toni. It seems seemingly unrelated to this work. I mean, the practical aspect of the work, anyway, the coming here, of sitting, of retreats, of talks, of discussion. And also, I mean, for me in discussion is that maybe I'm not being totally clear about something. Fine. Do we have to make a problem with that? Just as do we have to make a problem? I mean, I've seen it with my relationship with Toni that I can make a problem out of things that she says that I don't find clear. And I make a huge problem out of that and go away with it and say, why is this woman saying this?
One thing that occurs to me, the reason Toni's giving the talk is just because she happens to be good at it. And I know we get so hung up on her being the authority and her being the one who has it all and she's handing it to us or whatever. But boy, I'm really glad Debbie's in the kitchen. She just happens to be good, and that Wayne's the one who gets it. And if everybody switched jobs around here, it would be a very interesting experiment, but the place would fall apart pretty quickly. So I don't know why we always get so hung up. You just happen to be good. When my husband reads to the kids, it's a new dimension compared to when I read the same book. And you know who they ask for next time, so.
But is it good at giving talks, or is it something else? I mean, it's something that I don't know how to quite touch in this context here.
I think it's important to touch what you're bringing up right now. That's the crux of this whole thing.
But isn't that what Peter was saying? How does one know when one's doing this work?
How does one?
No one was really, I'm not using this work in a very specific way, I guess. And not just talking, not just being infatuated with one's voice and thoughts and self.
Yeah.
The most fertile time is, for me, is right there where I will call it confusion or muddiness or not knowing, or where that is alive.
See, you say the most fertile time for me is when the muddiness, the confusion is, or the not knowing is alive, whatever you mean by it, I have some feeling for it. Okay, so one comes to a talk and she talks about anger. And does one now want to stay with one's fertile ground of being what was so fertile last night or this morning during the sitting, and now she talks about anger? Or can one leave what was so fertile and be with what's on now? Because what's talked about is not specific to one human being or a few. It refers to all of us. And is that what's going on? Maybe one has to look. That one is holding on and would like to work on this, and she happens to work on that. And
is it specific to anger?
No, it could not.
Well, what do you mean it could be? It is anything.
What are you saying, Kyle? I didn't quite hear. Is nothing specific to anger?
Well, my agenda might be one thing, and her agenda is on anger, but is there any difference in the sense? The problem is still basically the same problem, whether you're discussing anger, whether you're discussing fear or anything else, isn't it?
And what is that problem, right? You're saying getting down to the root of one problem gets to the root of all problems. But if one hangs on to one and would like that discussed because it's mine, where I happen to be most, then there's already something going on, which is a barricading or enclosing. Resenting having to do something else just because she happens to, as though, she was.
More like the words don't resonate. It may be true what you say.
But why don't they resonate? Because they come with great passion and intensity. Most of the time. Why don't they resonate? What is there something that resists that? I know what she's talking about. It's always the same thing. It's some stuff that one may say to oneself, erecting barriers, the thoughts erecting the barriers, trying to keep intact me, my problem, my confusion or muddiness, with which I'm so identified, is me.
Isn't this sort of part of the problem or the dilemma of a talk is that, in a sense, the talk demands something of the listener that, if that were there to begin with, much of what the talk is pointing at is also that same thing. So,
same thing, yeah.
Could you say that again, Steve?
Well, it seems that to really be with the talk, and there not be me here and the other, whoever it is, there's just this looking and listening without anything going on here of what I want, what I would like to hear, or interpretation, or any of that. It seems that that's the only, I'm going to go out on a limb here, the only state that one can truly enter into the essence of the talk, and yet it's almost like that demand being made already of the listener is an enormous thing. And maybe why the person is here in the first place, because one is confused and caught up with me and my thoughts and what I want and who this person is and why they're saying this again, whatever it is. So how do the two sort of...
Sometimes it seems like it's kind of like riding waves, that you are connected, and then perhaps your personal question comes up, or just a question comes up, and maybe the thoughts of that or concern with that kind of wash over you for a while, and then reconnecting with what's being said, sometimes something comes through.
What is it that comes through? See, words could come through and words could be understood intellectually, but is there something else that happens beyond the words that are being said? That something connects which is not verbal?
I don't know, it almost seems like something physical just kind of penetrates, and then there's a kind of a relaxation of concern and strain, and some kind of release.
I think what comes through is the truth of what is being said. It's seen in oneself at that moment to be true. And in that seeing, or in that, there isn't any separation there. It's the same. It's the same what you're saying. It's the same there. It's the same here. It's true.
What is true? I'm not quizzing you, I'm looking.
I think it's not being separated from what.
Yeah.
Is that why in what's being seen, or is it the seeing itself? If it's what's being seen, it seems like one's caught up with some aspect of me again. And if it's a seeing itself, then there is really no separation between Toni and me.
Yeah.
Here and there.
Here and there, words, him and her, yeah.
So how can we make this work? I mean, without, fine, Toni gets talk, she has facility for this is great, this is helpful, but how can we make this work for ourselves?
Remember we talked in the kitchen the other night, does one have the essence or is in touch with the essence?
What do you mean, how do we make this work?
Yeah.
Well, we began with the question of giving talks and something in there about why only Toni, why not other people? And to me, the relevance of that question is, I mean, how when Toni's gone from here, all the activities go with it to a degree. There's no talks, there's no retreats, there's no discussion. The validity of the statement, why isn't someone else giving talks, to me is that, I would translate it as, why are we not continuing this kind of, how can we make this process continue? Where is the energy to do this work when Toni's not here? And maybe I'm not being totally clear on that, but
You do have retreats, so until during
we have
last.
one-day sittings. It's
Oh,
the only thing
okay.
we really do
Yeah.
have.
It's not that it doesn't exist on a personal level, but just not in an interpersonal way.
Sorry?
That's not to say that for individual people it
Right.
doesn't go on in a personal
I
way, but
agree.
it doesn't go on
I agree.
in an interpersonal.
I just have this feeling that nothing we're going to come up with here is going to answer this, and it just seems to come back. Maybe the question is wrong, but who gives the talks and what's going to happen? Is one clear oneself in all this? I mean, and that we can only seem to find out for ourselves now, or tomorrow, or 20 years from now. It seems.
But is there something we
It's
can,
another question for me.
is there something we can do
To be clear.
But still, we
no,
are here.
we go to retreat.
How is one working? I mean, any moment one can question. I mean, I understand what we're all questioning, because on a certain level there are those questions, but it seems that I'm just looking now, but it may be that that same level is all our confusion, you know, all the me again.
But then why have retreats and why have Tony talks and why have any of that?
Well, one needs to answer that for oneself in its conscious. Like with Richard, why is if somebody's confused, and one finds out why is one coming to a talk?
Right. All I'm saying is that are there other ways that we have this place, we're here 300 odd days a year. Are there other things we can do to facilitate that process? That maybe a poor way of saying it.
Well, what is the what is the urge for this place to continue? You know, like at a Zen center, there's an assumption that you want it to continue, and there's a lot of groundwork laid so that it will continue, and so that a new generation of people is capable of making it continue, etc. And here it seems that everything's being questioned, including those assumptions, like what is the urge for it to continue? And to what extent is that caught up in the urge for me to continue, the urge for me to have security, the urge for me to have a career, the urge for whatever, the urge for this place to exist because I plan to retire here or whatever, because there are things that could be done that would pave the way, but what I hear Tony saying is something really different, that just sort of to question where that urge is coming from, and then if there's clarity, then, or essence, or however you were putting it, then there's clarity about what to do, and it'll just emerge. Something will emerge. It might not be Springwater Center continuing.
I think for what Joan's saying, I also feel for what you're saying, Peter, and I think the way that maybe the two bridge in my mind is that maybe we do have another retreat, outside of the 8 retreats, or however many there are a year. But again, is it, because right now the importance of that, or whatever the reason, or is our motive because we want to sort of get a handle on what it'll be like without Tony, or I'm not sure how to sort of state this, but I think Joan really sort of made it clear. Because there might be an importance in having, we have all these sittings, or people really like coming to those, and we have to find out what it is, what it means to us, I guess. But what it means to us now, it seems to me, not as a sort of vehicle for what may happen, or a way to acquire,
No, I agree. I think it's our ongoing relationship. It's a day-to-day thing. It's the work that for me, and obviously I'm saying this now because it seems important to me, and maybe tomorrow I want to go to Ruby, but it's the work, it's not the place. The place is here. It's here. If it wasn't here, we wouldn't be holding retreats, or we'd be renting a place to hold retreats. So it's here. People are, giving us money to keep it going. It's here. I'm not that concerned about it continuing forever. If it does, fine. If it doesn't, fine. But it is this sort of ongoing, day-to-day, moment-to-moment relationship of who am I? How am I really living? How am I really relating? What is going on here? And it's the some way we have retreats because we all come to retreats. We all find this very helpful to really deeply address these things. Is there other ways we can deeply address these things? We have this place to do it. That's all.
There may not be retreats. For one, I think we'd all agree on staff that to put in another 3 or 4 retreats in an off period, I think people go away,
It's another thing. People.
I think it would be really, and it would be So, with the all-day sittings, people, we schedule those, and like you said, we do other things too.
You did schedule discussions
Yeah,
once,
we did.
and no one came, but you can discuss with each other. Or we can discuss. We do that. You say.
About what?
This whole thing we've been discussing, talks. Does it not have it?
I mean, one thing that I wonder about is whether I understand why I think I understand why people ask, why does Toni give the talks? Why don't other people do it? But I mean, is it that we're wondering that? Are we wondering whether there's dependency on Toni for getting something or seeing something clearly, or for clarity to come? Do we sort of feel that maybe even not consciously, but underneath it all, we depend on her for that? And I wonder whether sometimes I feel that in noticing that dependency, we tend to fight her or something like that, or I have a certain feeling that there's sort of a competitiveness with Toni, and I wonder if we're really addressing the question of dependency on her in fighting her. Does that ring a bell with anyone else?
Well, I think this whole thing about dependency on her, in this particular case, it came out of this discussion in the trustees meeting about what about when Toni's gone, dead or disabled, and then talking about, well, how do you work with it now, with the relationship with Toni, what her function is, and maybe that there's something possibly that we're not taking responsibility for ourselves and putting this function onto her, and that's what for me the question came to. Not, necessarily, it's not about fighting, I don't think, but maybe that's a different issue.
Is it somewhat similar to like how one deals with one's in a relationship or marriage or whatever it is, or how, the whole bit? What is one's relationship to that now, and dependency and security, and what will happen? I mean, obviously, one doesn't leave the home and the whole family to find out, maybe some people do, but to find out what it is, what dependency is, or what is one's attachment and all. How does one work within where one is? Here, Toni is here now, although she isn't here a good part of the year. But maybe in a certain sense we're not, well, anyway, so how does one work with that? And it seems like, again, the clearer we are right now, at any moment,
You brought up two things. It was interesting because sometimes people tell me that feeling competitive. There may be such a thing in us, and so it's good never to take any feeling or outpouring of feeling or ideas on face value, but wonder what does it come out of, or is there something it comes out of? One can't assume it is, but one can look.
You said competitive, that people are competitive for Toni's attention?
I guess I was thinking more in terms of who would give a talk.
Yeah, this is what people tell me. Yeah.
Oh, but somebody here competing with Toni, like to give his talks.
Well, to be the center of things, or to get the. I might misinterpret you less, but to be giving the talks, or to be the one who gets the attention.
Yeah, I'm
Sort of feeling jealous of that or something.
Oh,
yeah,
Or
yeah, all of that. All of that.
Or also, he or she sounds off or mouths this stuff. I know much more about that than she does. I mean, why should she be talking about psychological things or social or political stuff, whatever I do bring up at times? I could talk much better, and that probably is true.
Well, yeah, it also, it seems, this whole question raises too, why is one doing what one's doing, anybody, and does one take responsibility? Do I take responsibility for being where I am, and whatever? If I'm not too happy about what I'm doing, I mean, it seems the more into or uncomplicated or unproblematic we are in ourselves or what we're doing, it may not, some of these concerns may not be quite as strong either. On the level of like, why am I doing what this person's doing? Because maybe one has an idea, one would rather be doing that. I mean, that seems to be more important or enjoyable or the thing to do. Or I'm not denying that maybe one may find doing something other than what one's doing to be that, but it seems that again, if I'm clear about where I'm at and what I'm doing, that maybe I can take care of that and not sort of project it out onto this other person, and sort of compete in my head. So do I want to be the one giving talks? I mean, I can remember, some time ago, going for walks in a retreat, and boy, talks would be going on. And I just, for some reason, I just didn't think about it. I don't want to say I don't care, but it just, I don't know. And it can go the opposite, when you sort of have an apathy about things too. And it has to be clear about that. But it's like, why do we put such importance? I mean, there's probably a bunch of toilets in this building that could really use the cleaning and other things that are around that need attending to and all. And I'm not denying the importance of somebody who speaks and helps to clarify fundamental human problems, but we do tend to elevate these things.
And we turn to Toni for this.
Is there a difference between Toni and us? Anybody here could clean toilets, including Toni, but nobody else here can give talks.
That's not necessarily
has been the case.
I'm not sure anybody can clean the toilets.
What's that?
I'm not sure anybody can clean the toilets.
It's not an issue of competing about I don't want to give the talks, but I just feel like there's some implicit difference here. Maybe there is a difference. This person is. It's not just that, like, say you go to a university professor and they give a lecture because they've studied this, and they have. Then you don't feel there's a problem with that. Here's somebody who's giving a talk on something that they are more knowledgeable about. But this is something different.
And what is that difference?
What is that difference?
Yeah, people bring that to meetings. Just last week in Rochester, we spent all 35 minutes, which is our meeting time now. A person said there is something different. What is it? And look at that.
Well, I think what you have, Toni, is greater clarity and greater insight, which means that, anyone here may know more about any number of subjects than you do, and you may be wrong in a number of your opinions, and you may at times be very self-involved and not see it, etc. But nevertheless, you do have a lot of clarity and a lot of insight, which I think, who can say where that comes from? But I think partly what it comes from is years of doing this work. And also you know, you also have been through a lot of training, which you can say did or did not have an effect on you. But, you know, being put in a position where you were asked to hold meetings and give talks. But even before you were asked to give talks or hold meetings, I imagine that you had a level of clarity that somebody felt merited that, and i.e. would be useful to other people. And I think that comes from doing the work. And who can say what else? I mean, maybe it's an inborn talent, because certainly there are many people who spend their lives in centers, in practice centers, doing this kind of work, or and not in practice centers, but wherever, and they don't seem to end up as bright and shining examples as other people.
What is the use of turning to Toni for that clarity? And what happens when people do that?
Well, can you talk about yourself? I mean, look at yourself when you come in to a meeting, and we sit down on the sofa or in the sitting room, and you don't turn to me for clarity. We look at what's there, don't we? And as far as I'm concerned, not as two people, me and Richard with his problems, but here is something that is being opened up or shown, gone into.
But Toni, I think sometimes you really do deny the role you play or the function you serve when you say that, because in fact, a person does come in and now I don't know what other people's meetings with you are like. I've only been through my own, although I've certainly heard about other people's, and the letters that I get from you and stuff like that, the talks I hear you give, it isn't just, I mean, there are times when we are having a conversation that's like just two friends in the kitchen or something, but when I go in for a meeting with you, or some of the letters you write me, the whole syntax, it's all, there is something there about you're the teacher and I'm the student.
But when you come in, you tell me that I feel like a student right now, and people say, my heart is beating, I've been sitting in that waiting line. Maybe you're bringing that in.
Well, we are, but we're not bringing it in out of nowhere.
No, I mean, out of your conditioning.
Well, yeah, but that's true, but the situation is also, I mean, look at this situation right now. We are all gathered in a circle with you at the center of that, or however, not the center, but however we could express it. And you are the teacher in some way, and we can all look at how we put you in that position, but there's also something about the setup here that is putting you in that position that I think it's crazy to deny, you know.
You mean everybody sees it that way, though, John?
It's not just that we all see it that way.
No, maybe everybody sees it that way.
Well, I think if they don't, they're in massive denial.
When you came in the other day, didn't we have a cup of tea together? Did you refuse the tea? Some people refuse. Huh?
We did not have tea.
We didn't have tea.
But that's not
I don't know, and I don't do this in order to undo this, but this is how I feel. Somebody comes in, you want a cup of tea, and so we have a cup of tea. What you bring in, if you want to look at it, that's what we can do. But I love the sitting room, living room. I remember when Kyle said, shouldn't we try getting this apartment finished so you can meet with people in a nice room and don't have to have the meeting room. So this is why we finished the apartment, partly to meet with people in as unofficial or prejudged a way as possible. It doesn't quite work. People report this, that the heart beats, but sometimes this can be let go of, or let the heart beat as long as it beats, and then it eventually slows down and one doesn't notice it anymore. Here, today it was set up for talk. There's a plug here, and this is where I have to sit. I was thinking this morning, why couldn't I just sit where I was sitting in front of the window, and was going to write a note or ask somebody, and then I thought, oh, it's the plug I have to sit at. And we do sell tapes because people want to buy tapes. But for a discussion period, I take any which place. Do I sound offensive?
Yeah. I mean, I think we all
with it. I've talked enough about it.
Seems like
You have your images. Be happy with them. You're much happier without them, I can assure you. But if you want them, then go ahead with it.
But isn't it true that you could probably be hanging from the ceiling and people are still probably going to be asking you the question? I mean, it gets back to what was being said before. If there's a difference, then why don't we get at what that is? You know?
Yeah.
And I mean, apart from image and apart from what our past is, and the weird thing about it is if, you know, if that is entered into, then one is in the same place. Well, I don't know.
It's actually, it's not weird, it's the most natural way. Everything else is artificial, let's put it that
There is
way.
something that creates talks though, or
Huh?
discussions, isn't it? Interest in these questions?
Yeah.
I don't know.
Yeah.
And if someone sees a toilet that needs to be cleaned,
Yeah.
needs a toilet.
You mean, what you're saying is not just this woman, Toni, but it's an interest in discussing something.
And I think that comes back to the question